And I'm going to give over the control of our machine to you for your presentation, Clyde. Welcome.
Thank you, Ray, and it's a pleasure for me to be here, especially with colleagues from all over the country to talk about what we think is probably a very important, significant part of our program, and that's to train new directors, new district employees, as well as new NRCS district conservationists. That's the focus of our overall training program, as we have been doing for a number of years. Ray, tell me, are you still there? Let me see. I just need to tap on that arrow to move the slide. Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm not moving it. Let's try it one more time. I'm not moving it. Can you move it for me?
I can. You bet.
Okay, if you will. All right. So the key thing that we deal with, and sometimes I've often wondered whether this is the same issue all over the country, but you know, we have a very close working relationship with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, our agency, the Texas Soil and Water Conservation Board, and our soil and water conservation districts. And this has a tendency to cause confusion, both internally and externally. And what I simply mean by that is when it's kind of like the old Bud Abbott Lucastella program, you know, who's on first? And that's kind of the confusion that we see among these new directors, new employees when they come together, is trying to understand who does what in the game. So having said that, let's talk a little bit about why the lines, or we believe that the lines are blurred. Well, first of which, NRCS has a full-time staff. They're visible out in the field. They have identifiable office locations. They have identifiable vehicles. Whereas a number of our soil and water conservation districts, a number of them do own their own buildings and this sort of thing, so that's identifiable. But many are headquartered in association with an NRCS office. So therefore, when a client comes in, they have an interaction with district personnel, NRCS personnel. And from time to time, we have our own agency field staff working in relationship to those folks. So that is part of what we mean by the lines being blurred. The next big issue that we try to focus on in our training program then is who funds who. And obviously, you know, we got the federal funds coming from NRCS. We got the state funds coming from the state of Texas through our agency, all of which then filter down in one way or another to our conservation districts. And districts themselves also have the option to raise their own funds locally. So you've got a mixture of different things involved in this process. And that in itself lends itself to confusion. So next question, how do these entities link together? And the tool that links these folks together is a cooperative working agreement between NRCS districts and the state board. Now let's take a look a little bit about what's involved in this agreement. If you'll move the slide for me, Ray. First of which, we want to make sure that we clearly identify what authorities are defined within that agreement. You know, federal NRCS operates under federal laws, and the state operates under state laws. Districts operate under state laws as political subdivisions of state government. So we try to make sure that that's a key element of what's presented during our training program. And the reason for that is that this agreement specifies, you know, in general, how districts, NRCS, and the state works together. That is, in sharing and decision-making processes, communication, the sharing of training opportunities is what we're talking about now, and how to go about promoting mutual respect and support and trust for each other. Believe it or not, sometimes personnel issues can be a problem. So that's the key thing. Let's talk about personnel. Who reports to whom? That's an issue that oftentimes has become confusing out in the field, especially when you get new directors and new district conservationists. Who's the boss? So having said that, let's move forward to the next slide. We want to make it clear to district directors, new NRCS DCs, that each party is responsible for the hiring and the management, development, and evaluation of its own personnel. The district is responsible for establishing its workload priorities. and as well as advising the other parties of those priorities. However, this is done together in a cooperative, communal type of relationship where NRCS and districts, and from time to time, folks are able to sit down and they analyze and review what those issues are, and they work out a common goal or a common objective how to achieve the work that needs to be done. Now, within this agreement, we spell out, for the parties, what type of guidance is provided, equipment that's going to be used, and that type of thing. So move along again, Ray. I think I mentioned this just a few moments ago, but each party is to work together. That's highly stressed, to coordinate the individual staffing on the district level, and in order to achieve the objectives that the district needs to accomplish. Go ahead, next one. Now, from time to time, we get the question is, who should evaluate whom with respect to the workload? On a day-to-day basis, the district directors turn that supervisory role over to the NRCS folks, because that's the district employees and the NRCS folks are there on a day-to-day basis. So district employees work under supervision and guidance for the NRCS. But at the same time, the evaluations of a district employee is done by the local board, and the NRCS employees is evaluated by their own hierarchy. So we do stress to maintain we keep that separately. Let's move to the next one. And this is exactly what we're talking about this morning. We provide an annual opportunity for directors, both new and old, or I should say seasoned district employees, as well as new NRCS, to come together to discuss the philosophies and the laws and the regulations that govern each of the entity and how each relates to each other. And that's a mandatory, or I say mandatory, it's highly encouraged. I did not mention this, but one of the things that we do in the very early stages, when a new director comes on board, whether that individual is appointed to fulfill an unexpired position, or if they are elected according to state statutes, they are asked to sign an agreement. It's a voluntary thing, but they are asked to sign an agreement that they will attend an annual training program to help them better do their jobs and to learn the fiduciary responsibilities that they have. Okay, let's move on to the next one. We got sort of sidetracked there. I heard a little background. Ray, can you move to the next slide?
Yeah, on technical administrative assistance.
Yeah.
All right.
So district and NRCS. All right. Well, I kind of talked about that. Let's kind of move to the next slide. Kind of get ahead of myself because I'm so familiar with what we're doing here. But basically, districts and NRCS, they agree, and through this memorandum of understanding, to share equipment, share resources, anything that's necessary to help them carry on the work on a day-to-day basis. But again, we ask them to review this memorandum of understanding at least annually, because the rules, the regulations, the laws that are established that the state operates under, the federal government operates under, these are the things that help guide the use of all of these resources. Go ahead, Ray. Next. All right, well, that's again kind of what I'm just covered in a summary form. So let's move to the next one. Here's an important element that we stress in our training program, and that is the confidentiality of cooperator records, cooperator files, and conservation plans. Yes, we operate under the Open Meetings Act and the Public Information Act, etc. But there are still ways and methods that we work in association with the State Attorney General's office that we can comply with state law, while at the same time protecting the confidentiality of the cooperators in the field. So this is an extremely important thing that we stress in our training conference. In fact, for any elected official in the state of Texas, it may be elsewhere too, I don't know, but in the state of Texas, any elected official, whether it's on a state level or down to a political subdivision level, they are required to take 2 hours of training in public information as well as the Open Meetings Act. So we provide that as part of our training, and that takes care of that particular requirement for them. Basically, that's in summation then of what we do. I might add that one of the other key elements that we stress in our training conference program is the different types of programs, conservation programs that are available to districts through the state, through the federal government, and how these programs tie together. That's another strong element of our training program. So that pretty much concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Clyde. And I'm just reminded to tell folks that if you've got a question, go ahead and enter it into the questions dashboard. If you're a presenter, you'll use the chat room and we'll pick up the questions there for Clyde. Clyde, let me just ask one question of you, though. You just finished a round of these. In fact, I think NACD people came out with you to a couple of those trainings. Talk to us a little bit about that. How did those trainings go?
Well, they didn't throw rocks at us, so I guess they went okay. Yes, we were. It was a pleasure to have the Chief Executive Officer of NACD and a couple of national officers visiting with us. And last year, we had some additional folks. Even we had Mike Brown visiting and speaking with us a couple of years back. And we appreciate that. Here's the key thing. Here is the key thing about that. When we have those figures from NACD or NASCA or even NRCS, national level, visiting with us, that puts face-to-face time for newly appointed directors. They hear about these folks, they hear about these organizations, but once they learn to know who's who, it builds trust from the local level all the way to the national level on how these entities work together. So we appreciate the folks coming down and visiting with us. We can't stress that enough.
Thanks for a shout out on that. And I'm sure our technical employees appreciate that too, to be able to see those folks in person, get to shake their hand. You know, when we stop having viruses bothering us and whatnot, we'll go back to handshakes and whatnot. But certainly to meet them and see them must be great. Clyde, thanks so much. Again, a reminder to all of us, go ahead and pose your questions there on a questions dashboard. We'll pick those up in just a bit. So thanks, Clyde.